want it now, and I ain't never gonna back down.
Welcome to The Rise. I'm Debbie Antonelli. I'm so excited to be joined today by a man who has had an amazing journey in the game of basketball. From star high school athlete to ACC legend to playing with and against some of the all-time greats in NBA history. With a very successful broadcasting career as well, it's former Duke University and NBA center Mike Gminski. G-Man, as you're affectionately called by your friends, welcome to The Rise.
Debbie, thanks. It's a great pleasure to see you. Unfortunately, our positions coincide with one another, so I don't get to see you nearly as much as during the season as I would like to. So it's good to spend some time.
You too, Mike. I have admired you for a long time. I have the ultimate respect for you, and I'm wearing Duke blue just for you today. You know, G-Man, I want to talk to you about growing up in Monroe, Connecticut, and what that was like, your family dynamic.
We're in the very fringe of Fairfield County, which when I was growing up was the most affluent county in the country, really, because a lot of it in the southern part were bedroom communities for New York City. And now we were on the outer fringe of that. We didn't add much to the bottom line of the net worth of the county. But, I grew up playing Little League baseball there. So I didn't start playing basketball until the 8th grade, really. And, by that time I was about 6'5", so it seemed like a good fit.
Well, if you didn't start playing basketball till 8th grade, who had the greatest influence on you falling in love with the game at that time?
I grew up with the New York Knicks in the early 70s with Willis Reed and Dave DeBusschere, Dave Bradley, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe. That was my team. As I got older and into the game, I tried to pattern myself off after Dave Cowens. He was an inspiration to me from the professional level. Bill Walton was at UCLA winning championships. So I would say those two guys were the ones that I really tried to pattern myself after.
When you were at Massac High School, at some point you've figured out, you know what, I'm pretty good at this sport. When did you realize that you had a future in it?
Well, my first love was baseball, and I was really good in middle school. I led the varsity hitting my freshman year at Massac, but, I was 6'7" at that point, and I was starting for the varsity. And actually, Maryland was the first university in my school as a freshman. Joe Harrington, assistant, came up and watched me play a pickup game. And so it became evident to me that going forward athletically, the basketball was going to be my sport.
Is it true that you were discovered by Lefty at basketball camp? I know you said it was Coach Harrington that did the recruiting.
I made the decision after my sophomore year that I was going to graduate in 3 years. So I was way ahead of the reclassification that they have now. So in doing that, I knew the schools that I was really interested in. Maryland was one of them. I went down with a guy who was my point guard to their basketball camp. And Lefty was a very impressive recruiter. He was driving me around the stations in his Cadillac. And, but the irony of the whole thing is that there was a counselor there named Terry Chili, who was a rising senior at Duke. And he saw me and he started to chat Duke up. That's how they got into the recruiting process completely by a fluke. I would have never probably heard about Duke if that meeting hadn't happened.
What is your family thinking? You're going to graduate from high school early and you have this opportunity at Duke. Why Duke?
I went down to Durham. It was homecoming. They were playing Clemson, as a matter of fact, in football. I fell in love with the school. I knew I wanted to get out of Connecticut and go south, and I wanted to play in the ACC. Such a big percentage of the student population was from the Northeast. So for me, it was like getting away and not getting away.
Mike, when you arrived on campus, you were like a walking bucket. You were 17 years old before as a starter, as a freshman. I mean, you weren't even 18 years old. I mean, put that in perspective with today's players.
I couldn't even imagine going into the NBA at 18 years old or 19 years old. I mean, that just boggles my mind. And for what I did physically, I was ready for college basketball, and I've had no problems competing at that level physically as far as maturing. But things caught up to me my first few years in the league. The year we went to the finals, we played 34 games. So, for me, going from 30 games to 80 games, and that's back when centers still roamed the earth. I mean, I'm playing against Bob Lanier, Wes Unseld, Dave Cowens, my idol, Bill Walton,
Wow.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, these are Hall of Fame grown men. I took my lumps for the first 2 or 3 years physically until I was able to catch up.
Mike Gminski cements his legacy at Duke when the rise continues.
And then when we won the ACC tournament, that momentum catapulted us into the NCAA tournament.
Welcome back to the rise, Mike Gminski. I want to take you back to college because you played with some legendary guys that really helped formulate what Duke is today. Jim Spanarkel, Gene Banks, Kenny Denard. What was it like playing with those guys?
We were so different emotionally, just different backgrounds. We played for the perfect coach. And I tell people this, that Coach Foster, as a hobby, he was a drummer. And, you got to have all your limbs doing all different things at the same time. And Coach was great at multitasking, but he was great at managing our personalities. And he let us be who we were, yet when we got onto the floor, we coalesced perfectly. Just to fast forward, Deb, I mean, we are as close, if not closer, in 2023 than we were in the late 70s. And our team has stayed intact, which is amazing to me.
Not many people can say they've had friends for 4+ decades like you have, Mike. That's just amazing. You played in 2 ACC championship games. What was the ACC tournament like back then compared to what it is today?
Well, completely different, actually. There were 7 teams in the league my first 3 years, and then Georgia Tech came in my senior year to make it 8. But the ACC tournament was just, it was special. I'm a little bit old school, and for me, it's always going to be the Greensboro Coliseum. Just so many great memories from those times that we had.
You also played in the first nationally televised ACC tournament game in Greensboro, and now here you are as a broadcaster, kind of transcend playing on TV to doing what you do now with your career.
Being on TV was a big deal. I mean, you had the Jefferson Pilot Game of the Week. There was one game that was on, and it was a big deal. To go on then being on the wide world of sports, which we all watched growing up, that was probably the sports show, in that era.
Well, unless the fire marshal got stuffy about it, I'll bet you we've got 16,000 people stuffed into the Greensboro Coliseum for the title game of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
And at center for Duke, number 43, Mike Gminski.
On the rebound, Gene Banks for the Blue Devils. Now it's Gminski inside. Good.
That was the breakthrough for us. We beat North Carolina earlier that year when they were ranked number 3 at Cameron. So it really jump-started that rivalry again. It got our fan base excited. And then when we won the ACC tournament, that momentum catapulted us into the NCAA tournament.
Exactly, into the NCAA tournament to play against Kentucky. And I know this is probably going to ruffle your skin a little bit, but when I say Goose Gibbons and 41 points from Kentucky, what comes to mind?
Well, for me, I mean, I tell people that's still the highest scoring tournament final ever. And that was without a 3-point line and without a shot clock. But I didn't have a great shooting night. I was 6 of 16 from the floor. If I'm 11 of 16, which is not even an outstanding game for me, we win that game. They were all seniors, and that team had a real sense of urgency that I don't think we had. I remember after the game was over, our fans started chanting, "We'll be back." And the fact of the matter is we never got back. I don't know that we fully appreciated how hard it is to get back to the Final Four.
G-Man, how many times have you watched that game from 1978?
None. I can't watch it. I mean, believe me, Never. I have seen bits and pieces of it in highlights, just where that game will pop up, but I still have not. I still have not fully watched that game.
G-Man, the ACC tournament in 1980. You're playing Maryland. Was there any controversy in that one?
Well, now there was a weather issue. Coach Foster said that it would snow during the ACC tournament before he won a championship. That was a good omen to start with. But played against two guys that I wound up being teammates with for a number of years up in New Jersey, and Buck Williams and Albert King. At the end of the game, we're down one. Vince Taylor drives, misses the shot. Kenny Denard keeps the ball alive and taps it over to me, and I'm wide open for an easy follow-in, which gives us the lead. So we come down the other end, so they get the ball to Albert. I challenge the shot. The ball hits on the front of the rim and goes straight up in the air, and Buck Williams is right there, and so is Kenny Denard. And Kenny just, let's just say, if you're a Duke fan, it was a very aggressive block out. If you were a Maryland fan, it was an undercut. This was before three referees. If there was a third one, they might have seen it, and there was no whistle. Ball winds up missing, and we won our second tournament championship in 3 years. You'll appreciate this, Deb. The years and years when I was doing Sunday night hoops, we went up to Cole Fieldhouse, and this was like 30 years after the fact. And an usher came up to me with this real stern look on his face. And he said, that was a foul. and he kept on walking. And I'm like, dude, this is, that's like ancient history. But like me not watching that final game, there are memories of, there are memories on both sides of it for a lot of people.
Mike, your number 43 hangs in the rafters at Cameron. I know when you go in Cameron, you have to at least look up there. What do you think of or remember most fondly about your time at Duke?
I remember my guys. Yeah, am I extremely proud of what I accomplished individually? Yes, but it's a team game. The one thing that getting my jersey retired, which happened right before my senior night game. And I didn't know they didn't tell me they were going to do it.
Oh.
I had no preparation. We played Clemson. For the first 10 minutes of the game, I forgot how to play. I was just so spent from that ceremony. And I gathered myself, had a good game, and we wound up winning in overtime. It was completely overwhelming to the point where I told them, I said, look, if you're going to do this going forward, let the person know and maybe do it after they graduate and come back and have a ceremony for them, which is what they do now.
Mike, as your friend, I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I'm putting my feet right where you are, thinking about what that must have meant to you, knowing that you had really changed with your teammates the course of Duke basketball, and here your jersey is in the rafters. It's just phenomenal.
I've told Nolan Smith and John Shire, I pointed to their national championship banner, and I said I would trade my jersey for a 78 banner, and I wouldn't even think about it. That's kind of puts in perspective for me about all the individual stuff that I've had.
More with Mike Gminski after these messages.
My three most special arenas in the world are Greensboro Coliseum and Madison Square Garden.
Welcome back to The Rise with Mike Gminski. G-Man, let's shift to the NBA because you were the 7th pick in the first round by the New Jersey Nets. Mm-hmm. What was that like? What was that moment like for you?
It's completely different than it is now. The draft was held up in New York City at a place called the Felt Forum, which is an adjunct to Madison Square Garden, and they have a lot of boxing and smaller events in there. There was no TV. I don't even know if we were introduced. We were, as a kid growing up, this was my team, and then becoming a pro up in that area and playing. My three most special arenas to me in the world are Cameron, Greensboro Coliseum, and Madison Square Garden. Because that's just if you're from that area, that's the center of basketball. So be able to play there was really an honor.
How would you describe your scouting report from your college days to your pro days?
The reason I was able to score in the NBA, and this was a shot that I got from Dave Cowens. He was an undersized center, and he had a jump hook. So I worked on that in high school. I improved on it at Duke, and I was able to get that shot up against anybody that I played with. So I had that, and I had an 18-foot jump shot. So for a lot of my career, I played in the high post. I could score down low with my jump hook, but I played with two Hall of Fame power forwards in Buck Williams and Charles Barkley. So we did a lot of high-low action. I was able to, take my talents and fit into what worked best for our team.
In 1994, you decided that you were going to retire and step away from your professional playing career. Anything left on the table? Any regrets? Something that you didn't finish?
It was funny. I was still in Charlotte, and the season was over. I came back, and Steve Martin, who did their TV forever, he said, we have a position coming open on our broadcast team. Is that something you would consider? I said, how soon do you need an answer? And he said, September is fine. And I was thinking about a number of things. I was thinking about politics. I was thinking about going back to law school. And I was also thinking, maybe I want to play another year or two, but I couldn't get myself to get into the gym that summer and begin training again. And to me, that was a huge red flag. So I called Steve up and I said, I'd love to join your broadcast team. So we had a little press conference. I announced my retirement, and he announced my hiring as part of the broadcast team.
Mike Gminski faces his toughest opponent when the rise continues.
I knew I had a problem. My ego just didn't allow me to accept help.
Welcome back to The Rise. We're visiting with Mike Gminski. No one goes through life without some adversity, some battles that we might face, and you're winning one of the hardest battles that you have ever faced, and that is the battle with alcoholism. I'm so grateful that you have the courage to talk about it, because I know you care about helping some others that might be facing similar challenges.
I drank beer in college, and it never affected my play, and the same thing in the pros. And then I started, when I was broadcasting, started having cocktails, and and life was good. It was under control. And then I faced some really hard life things that everybody faces. I went through a divorce. I went through bankruptcy. I went through being engaged, finding the love of my life, who was significantly younger. Sarah was 23 years younger than me. She had liver issues, and her blood stopped being able to clot. And so I held her, trying to bring her back to life, and before the EMTs got there, and she wound up dying. She was on life support, and we took her off the next day. I decided, all right, I'm not going to go seek professional help. I'm not going to go to counseling. I'm an athlete. I can see my way through this. I'm going to self-medicate. And I took my drinking to a whole new level. And my Duke guys gave me a hall pass for about 2 years. In 2017, Kenny Denard tried to have an intervention with me, and I wasn't ready to hear the message. I just went off. I got mad. I hung up on him and continued on my merry way. And things got worse and worse. And finally, as bad as COVID was that whole time, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I made it through that year broadcasting. And if you remember, the ACC tournament was cut short right after the first day. And we had to isolate in place. So I'm like, all right, you're telling me that all I have to do is sit in my apartment and I can drink all day long. And that's what I did. And my son Noah was right at the front line for all of that. And things got worse and worse, to the point where he had an intervention for me. And at that time, I was ready to hear the message, and I didn't flinch. And I went down to Rebound, Jason Williams' facility. He was a teammate of mine when we were in Philly. And it changed my life. I spent 2 months down there and inpatient, and then came back to Charlotte and did 6 months of outpatient work. And I just celebrated 2.5 years sober in January. But I'm just hoping that by telling my story that I can help people.
When you start thinking about that time with Noah, how proud are you of him for stepping in and helping save your life?
Well, he's an incredible young man. I say young, he's going to turn 25 on March 4th this year. For him to not have lost faith in me, and just say, all right, Dad, you're on your own. I'm out of here. He never did. He never wavered. Leading up to that intervention, I thought I was being real slick, and the recycling bin would fill up pretty quick. So I started throwing some bottles back in this wooded area back behind our apartment just to keep the optics down. He had found those bottles, and he placed about 20 of them on the kitchen table, dirt, leaves, all sorts of stuff on them, and he left a note saying, "Dad, I love you. I want to help you." And if you don't think that is as humbling as it gets, that was the first step. And I think the intervention probably happened about 3 months later after that. Having him say all those things, I knew I had a problem. My ego just didn't allow me to accept help.
Mike, when you take a breath and you think back, and I know how grateful you are for your incredible journey that you've been on it through basketball and through all the adversity that you've faced. When you look back and think about what you might be most fond of, what would that be?
As far as awards, turn of the century, Sports Illustrated picked the 50 greatest athletes from the 20th century. And then they did each individual state. And I made that group from Connecticut. My Jersey retirement at Duke was special. Although I got to tell you, the three-time academic All-American and being in the academic All-American Hall of Fame and being the first Duke athlete in that Hall of Fame was really meant a lot to me. And then it's just hearing stories of people tell me how I've impacted their life. I think that's the most important thing that to look back on and say, if you made a difference in people's lives, and you got a pretty good life in your own right.
Mike, it's been a real honor to spend this time with you. You're an ACC legend. You're an NBA great. You're a terrific teammate. And most importantly, you're like a brother to me. I'm so grateful that we could do this together.
Same here, Deb. You're a sister, and I've been so blessed with people like you in my life. I love you. I love all the people that that we've talked about during this time, and I'm truly blessed.
Be sure to check in for more Rise episodes and other original programming and memorable games on Origin Sports. I'm Debbie Antonelli. Thanks for joining us.